What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind
All
of
right,
diplomacy
so
that's
everybody
gonna end
saw
the
what
destruction of your
happened.
country.
Yes, but if
Everybody
Mr.
saw the
President, Mr. President,
whole
with respect, I think
fallout
it's
between
disrespectful for you to come to
Zelensky,
the Oval
Trump, and
Office and try to
JD
litigate this in
Vance.
front of the American media.
A lot of
Right
people
now, you guys
who
are going around
basically
enforcing
just hate
conscripts to
everything
the
that
front
Trump
lines
does
because
and
you have
everything that Trump
manpower problems.
represents
You should be
believe
thanking the
Trump
president
was
for trying to
wrong
bring an end to this
in this
conflict.
whole
Do you
conflict.
think that you have a lot of questions
I'm
on
going
this
to present
subject?
evidence
Sure.
of
First
why
of all,
I
during the war,
believe the
everybody has
opposite.
problems. Even you,
This is
when
not
you
about
have muscles
Zelensky
and
standing
don't
up
feel
to a
now, but
bully
you will
and
feel
proving
it
he's a
in
man.
the future.
This is,
God
in
bless you.
fact,
God bless
exactly
you.
what
God bless
Donald
you.
Trump
Not
said.
even war.
Don't tell us what
Zelensky
we're
is
trying to
acting
solve
like
a
a
problem.
dictator.
Don't tell us what
The
we're
guy
gonna feel.
is a bloodthirsty
You're in no
idiot,
position to dictate that.
and I'm going to prove it.
You're in no
But
position
before all
to
that,
dictate
you
what
need
we're
to
gonna
keep
feel.
two
We're gonna
things in
feel
mind.
very
You will
good.
feel influence.
The first thing I'm going to show you
Very good and very
is
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're
a
right
little
now
bit
not in a
of
very good
one
position.
person's mindset,
You've allowed yourself to
and
be
the
in a very
second
bad
thing
position, and
is
that
a
must
little
be
bit
right
of
about it.
From the very beginning
a historical
of the war,
comparison
Not in a good position.
of what we're
You don't have
actually
the
dealing
cards
with.
right now. With us, you start
Have a
having
look.
cards.
Cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think
You're gambling with World War III.
Anyone that has a privilege of having one understands why the ring is the thing. I keep them in a drawer where I have my cufflinks. They're all in a drawer except for my third one. The original is in Russia with the president of the country. I happened to be there on a business mission with my friend Sandy Weil. We had just given out our rings. I showed Sandy my ring and he said, "Why don't you show it to the president?" And I showed it to him and he put it on and he sort of enjoyed it, so he kept it on.
It was last night here on World News. We reported on the owner of the New England Patriots who said President Putin stole his Super Bowl ring. Tonight, Putin is firing back. ABC's Kirit Radia in Moscow.
Vladimir Putin is a lot of things. President of Russia, animal lover, judo master, thrill seeker. What he's not, the Kremlin says, is a thief. Tonight, Putin's aides are denying he stole a diamond-encrusted Super Bowl ring from New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. The two met in 2005. Both sides agree that Kraft showed him his Super Bowl bling, reportedly worth over $25,000. They also agree that Putin left with it. Kraft issued a statement at the time saying he gave Putin the ring as a gift, a sign of friendship with the Russian people. But on Thursday, Kraft revealed what he says is the real truth. He says he handed Putin the ring to look at and remembers the former KGB spy saying, "I could kill someone with this ring." Then, according to Kraft, the Russian president pocketed it, all 4.94 carats, all 124 diamonds. Kraft says he called it a gift only after pressure from the White House. Today, the Kremlin is pushing back. An aide to the president told ABC News the ring was definitely a gift, calling Kraft's claims weird.
It isn't quite the Cold War, but somewhere in the Kremlin behind me is a Super Bowl ring. And the only thing that's clear is that it isn't coming back.
So basically what you just watched is the mindset of Vladimir Putin. The man is stubborn and he takes what he wants. And that's it. End of story. He takes what he wants. He does not give it back. Keep that in mind going forward. The situation right now is very similar to something else that happened years ago. I'm going to play this and see if you can pick out the comparisons, then I'll explain.
Close calls. If you think history is boring, buckle up. The Cuban Missile Crisis was like a real-life thriller. On October 14, 1962, a U.S. U-2 spy plane snapped photos that rocked the world. Soviet missile bases in Cuba, just 90 miles from American shores. President Kennedy got the news 2 days later. After intense debates, he chose a naval blockade. No more Soviet ships in or out. On October 22nd, Kennedy went on TV. He told everyone about the missiles and the blockade. The world held its breath. We were on the edge of nuclear war. Then came the nail-biting negotiations. Back channels buzzed. Secret deals were made. Finally, on October 28th, Soviet Premier Khrushchev blinked. Missiles out of Cuba, U.S. promises not to invade. And oh yeah, we quietly pulled our missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't just history, it was a near miss with catastrophe. And in the end, we got something good, the Moscow-Washington hotline, and quick calls, no more close calls.
Prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis, we attempted to invade Cuba. It failed. As a result, Cuba got Russia to supply them with weapons to defend themselves against future invasions from us. We saw the weapons that Russia built inside Cuba as a direct threat to the United States, being as it was something like 90 miles from our shores.
Turn back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
It was so close that it could hit any state at any time. For this, we thought we were in the right in basically forcing Russia to pull their weapons out of Cuba because their weapons were too close to our shores. Fast forward, you have Crimea. Crimea used to be Russian territory. It was given to the Ukraine as a gift. Then Crimea held a vote. When was this? I believe it was sometime in 2012 or something like that. They wanted to rejoin Russia. They held a vote, and here were the results.
Crimeans voted overwhelmingly on Sunday to break away from Ukraine and join Russia in a referendum the West condemned as illegal. With half the ballots counted, 95.5% of Crimea residents voted to break away from Ukraine, according to local officials.
Ну, сегодня, как у всех севастопольцев, ощущение праздника. Праздника воссоединения с нашей истинной родиной России. В принципе, мы никогда от нее и не отходили, и себя также и чувствовали.
Crimea's government said voter turnout was strong throughout the peninsula, which is dominated by ethnic Russians who see the referendum as an opportunity to return Crimea home and to receive more economic support for an area dependent largely on tourism.
Ожидание, что наконец все-таки получит развитие наш регион, что наконец Россия займется нами вплотную, что мы действительно станем процветающим краем.
Crimea is also home to Ukrainians, as well as Crimean Tatars, who account for more than 12% of the population. The Tatars, who are skeptical of Kremlin rule after their deportation under Stalin in the 1940s, largely boycotted the referendum, calling it illegal. US and European Union officials immediately rejected the results after early exit polls, saying the international community should respond with concrete measures against Russia for its violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. Russian troops have been occupying positions across the peninsula since late February. Meanwhile, Ukraine's acting defense minister announced Ukraine and Russia had agreed to a truce until Friday, suggesting Russia wouldn't move to take over Ukrainian bases immediately after the referendum. He suggested a standoff would continue.
Ніхто Крим залишати не буде. Це однозначно. Тому зараз обстановка щодо наших військових частин і блокування нормалізувалася. Я думаю, що як було досягнуто на перемир'ї, до 21 числа вона такою і буде зберігатися.
The Kremlin press service said Russian President Vladimir Putin believes the referendum was being conducted in full accordance with international law and that Russia will respect its results.
Translation for anyone who doesn't speak fluent Russian like I do. Putin saw a Super Bowl ring, he took it, and he's not giving it back. Enter Vladimir Zelensky. He too would like a Super Bowl ring, or as we're calling it, Crimea. He will do whatever it takes to win back Crimea. He's gone so far as to attempt to have the Ukraine join NATO. When Ukraine joins NATO, we are obligated to defend the Ukraine in any conflicts. Basically, what Zelensky wants is to have all of Europe and the United States at his back when he goes and attempts to take Crimea back from Russia. That is his goal. He went into the White House and he was instructed to sign a mineral deal, keep his head down, and leave.
Met with Zelensky this morning. I urged him to stay on message, be grateful, be thankful. We'll talk about details of security guarantees later. Keep it upbeat, keep it positive. It was absolute, utter disaster.
He couldn't do this because he doesn't want a peace deal. He doesn't want a peace deal. He doesn't want to sign a mineral deal. What he wants is for the United States and Europe to have his back when he attacks Russia. That's all he wants. Here he can be seen signing missiles that he plans on dropping on Russia. The man does not want any sort of peace. He doesn't want to work this out diplomatically. He wants to fight. And he doesn't care how many of his soldiers go down in the process. Trump recognized this, and I'm sure after speaking with him over the course of many months, Trump was fully aware that the guy was not looking for peace. He was looking to take back Crimea from Russia. Biden enabled this. Trump stopped it. He says if he wants to fight, he can go ahead and fight, but he's going to do it without the United States. Now, by putting Ukraine in the position where it could possibly join NATO, which honestly it's not going to happen, he's forcing Russia to take a stand that basically says if the Ukraine joins NATO, then he's going to basically defend himself. It's kind of like the Cuban Missile Crisis all over again, but for Russia. If NATO moves into Ukraine, that's basically having weapons right on Russia's doorstep, the same as what happened with us in Cuba. And he's treating it exactly the same way. Now, if we were right in that situation, why isn't Russia?
Washington on one side and Moscow on the other, because surely what President Zelensky wants the most is to become a member of NATO, and to become a member of NATO now. He surely believes that that's the best way to keep his country secure from any possible Russian threat.
It is not only President Zelensky, it's people of Ukraine want to become a part of NATO and part of European Union. And that's why we had a revolution in 2014 to explain to all the world that we are part of civilized world.
Russia has to its east a sea and one of its allies in North Korea. North Korea and that sea are Russia's barriers against both Japan and South Korea. To the north, Russia has an ocean. To the south, Russia has China, an ally. It also has Mongolia, which is basically a country full of Asians who speak Russian. It also has Kazakhstan, which is essentially a country full of Asians that speak Russian. Now, if you look to its west, the situation is a little bit different. To Russia's west, they have essentially a bunch of countries that are allies to Russia, with the exception of Poland and the Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine used to be an ally of Russia, but if that were to change and the Ukraine were to join NATO, you have a path for NATO forces to go through Poland, through the Ukraine, and go right into Russia, or even to control the sea to the south there via Crimea. It's a critical point, and they can't let it go for the sake of their national security. It's very much, again, like the Cuban Missile Crisis. If NATO were to set up shop right there in the Ukraine, on the doorstep of Russia, they'd be very vulnerable. If it was the United States, we'd be doing the exact same thing.
Я хочу еще раз все-таки подчеркнуть это. Я говорил, но мне очень бы хотелось, чтобы вы меня услышали все-таки в конце концов. И донесли это до своих читателей, зрителей и пользователей в интернете. Но вы понимаете или нет, что если Украина будет в НАТО и военным путем будет возвращать себе Крым, европейские страны автоматически будут втянуты в военный конфликт с Россией. Конечно, значит, потенциал объединенной организации НАТО и России несопоставим. Мы понимаем. Но мы также и понимаем, что Россия одна из ведущих ядерных держав. А по некоторым компонентам по современности даже многих опережает. Победителей не будет. И вы окажетесь втянутыми в этот конфликт помимо своей воли. И вы даже не успеете глазом моргнуть, когда будете исполнять пункт 5 Римского договора. Господин президент, конечно, не хочет этого развития. И я не хочу. И я не хочу. Поэтому он здесь и находится, и мучает меня уже 6 часов подряд.
This is not about standing up to bullies. This is not about being a man. This is not about pride or any of that stuff. This is a stupid dispute over a tiny speck of land that only means something to some guy who can't even be bothered to wear a suit. Much like Gaza, and hopefully it doesn't end up the same way. The people of Crimea voted to rejoin Russia. Ukraine does not recognize that vote. A territorial dispute can be negotiated. It can be talked about. It can be worked out. But a full-fledged war with missiles on people's borders is not something that you can negotiate on. Much like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the missiles, or in this case, any NATO forces, would have to be removed for Russia to feel any sort of security with their borders. Zelensky doesn't care about any of that stuff. Zelensky wants to drag the entire world into a fight over Crimea, which is why Trump said,
You're gambling with the lives of
anymore.
millions of people.
You think
You're gambling with World War III.